learn to improve conversions and generate more leads with the video podcast at marketingoptimization.tv. Hi, and welcome to Marketing Optimization with AlexDesigns. I'm your host, Alex Harris, and today we're talking with Hiten Shah. How you doing, Hiten?
Pretty good.
Excellent. To get started, what would be your definition of optimization and why is it beneficial?
Sure. When I think about optimization, I think about improvement. So to me, optimization encompasses finding the right thing to improve and then improving it on the most basic level. And there's a lot of deeper sort of things to that. But at the end of the day, I think it's just about improvement and making improvements based on the right thing you should be improving.
Right. Now, with Kissmetrics or CrazyEgg or any of the new projects that you probably work on or advise, you've probably done a lot of testing throughout the year. So I want to kind of dig into maybe some successes or failures and really what you've learned from it. Because I know from my aspect, it's not about necessarily testing all the time, but testing the right thing. So let's talk about how do you come up with the right things to test? Just give us a little bit of a framework of how you think about that.
Sure. I think there's a lot of different ways to come up with tests. One of the most common and easiest ways, which I think is where a lot of people have pitfalls, is they'll just look on the web and find tests other people have run. And those tend to be sort of some of the worst ways that you can do testing. And one of the reasons for that is your traffic is unique. It's very likely your product or service, your point of view, as actually I like to call it, is also unique. And so if you're just looking across the web and finding what I would call like testing best practices and just testing those, I think actually for me, they've worked for a little bit, but after a while you run out of things to test. And if you haven't really created a method for you to actually figure out what to test for your site, then what ends up happening is that you lose out. You stop making improvements, and then until you can have some methodology or some idea of what to test for your own service or your own product, your own website, you're basically stuck. You're relying on other people's ideas.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that since you've probably ran a lot of tests on any of your sites, you've maybe reached a point of that local maximum. Can you explain that and maybe how you've maybe had some breakthroughs in tests to kind of, break through some things maybe you weren't actually receiving any wins?
Sure. That's a good point. So a local maxima is when you sort of can't get more than, let's say, a 5-ish% improvement on a test. That's the way I like to define it. So you try all kinds of things. You make some big wins in the beginning, maybe 10, 15, 20 or higher percentage improvements on, let's say, a purchase rate on an e-commerce site. Or even a sign-up rate on a SaaS application, and then you hit a wall where basically the current design, the current flow isn't getting you the same level of significant improvements. So, and this is very common when you just use best practices, because what worked for other people won't necessarily work for you. So the way that I've figured out how to sort of get past it is, I think best practices are good, or even like things people put out there. I just use those as inspiration to help me figure out what to test. But it doesn't necessarily tell me why I should be testing and exactly what is the biggest bottleneck in my flow or my funnel. And so the first thing to do would be to identify where that biggest bottleneck in your own funnel is, and then use all the tools that are available to you, including conversations with people, to really figure out what the problem is. Why haven't they done that thing that you really want them to do or that they should be doing? So for example, on an e-commerce site, people might not be purchasing, but they're adding to the cart. It's likely if they're adding to the cart and then they're abandoning, that you can catch them in that moment and find out why they're abandoning. And so, there's a lot of different tools out there. There's ones that do like website surveying. There's also other ones around usability. So there's one that we actually built and sold called Qualaroo, where you can pop up a little survey on a website. So what I like to do is I like to do what they call an exit intent survey. So right when someone tries to exit and close the window, right on that sort of cart page, you pop up a survey and say, what prevented you from purchasing today? And that's the only way I would do that is if you had that problem of people adding to the cart but not actually finishing their purchase. And from there, if you ask enough people that, you'll actually learn what the problem is with your actual business, not exactly what the problem is with someone else's business that wrote some article about how you should make your button bigger or change the copy on your button. I think those are just ideas for inspiration on what to change, but you really need to figure out, how to get a guess or a hypothesis, as many people call it, an educated guess about what you should be changing and why.
Yeah, some great steps right there, because you're really trying to get as much qualitative research as possible. And I did see your talk at OptiCon where you mentioned how to use qualitative and quantitative data to get bigger wins, really double your win rate. And some of the questions that you may ask on those Quality Root pop-ups could be finding out why people don't convert. Were they able to find the right information that they were looking for? Asking people why what was preventing them from signing up, or why did they cancel? Learning what frustrates them is really important. And in e-commerce, you can also, if you do have people registered for your site, you can automatically send emails to people to get them back into your cart to finish that sale. Some great information right there. I know I use user tools as well to survey people and watch them go through my site, my competitor sites, and search queries. Do you guys use usability testing or session cam or anything like that as well?
Yeah, we use user testing more than anything else, just because I like hearing what the person is saying. I don't just like watching them abandon, although those things are useful. We've also built products in the space like CrazyEgg that can sort of give you a heat map and some other visuals of exactly what's going on the page. So we tend to use our own tools, of course, that we've built. But additionally, I think user testing has been really huge. And also just literally watching someone, like just standing behind them and watching them use the site, like in a coffee shop or whatever, it has been really insightful as well. Just basic stuff. Anything you can do to figure out where people are getting stuck, I would do, and then figure out why.
Yeah, and to add on to that, with CrazyEgg, they also have what they have confetti, where you can see where people are actually clicking on, and I think it's based on the queries that they came over for, right? Can you explain how confetti works and some of the aspects of CrazyEgg?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a very unique feature we have in CrazyEgg. We pioneered heat maps early on, about almost 10 years ago now, close to 10 years. It'll be 10 years next year. And then we added this thing called confetti. And with confetti, you get basically dots on the page that indicate where people actually clicked. And then you can segment them. So you can basically change the color of the dots based on the refer, the search term, the search engine, country, device type. I'm literally reading off the list. It's pretty huge. Operating system, browser, day of week, which we found really interesting, time of day, time to click, window width, and any campaign data where you're tagging the campaigns with traffic. And this is like UTM campaigns and stuff like that. And so what we tend to do is we tend to just really explore first exactly what's going on the page, especially once we identify that that's a page worthy of improvement. And usually that identification happens because you're looking at a funnel or you just see a high bounce rate on a certain page.
Now we know who is going through the pages. We're asking them questions about why they're converting or not converting, and really building up those different personas and that qualitative research. And we're going to now use that data to make decisions for tests. Let's just briefly talk about the quantitative aspect. What would be some of the how you would prioritize understanding your analytics to figure out where to test and why?
Sure. I think on the most basic level, people have Google Analytics installed. And so the first step, if you have Google Analytics installed without even installing anything else, is take a really good look at your pages that are, sort of people are visiting, and just find ones with high bounce rate and or, visitors with low time on site from a certain refer. So those are two really easy tactics. I have a pretty simple formula around I call it the sort of buy low, sell high theory of marketing and optimization. And basically what it is if something's driving, let's say this is about channels, and I like to think about channels as well, because a lot of times where the traffic comes from greatly impacts the sort of conversion rate. And so, taking that sort of buy low, sell high theory, if something's getting a lot of traffic and it's getting a low amount of conversions, you probably want to do some A/B testing and conversion optimization from that channel. And most of the tools out there for A/B testing will actually let you target specific refers. An example of this would be Optimizely. They make it really easy to target specific refers and just do improvements for them and just do tests for them. The other side of the sort of buy low, sell high theory is if something's getting a low amount of traffic but has a high conversion rate, you probably want more traffic from that source, obviously. So you would go figure out how to do that. And so that really makes all these decisions really easy. Taking this bounce rate theory as well, if something gets a lot of traffic and it's sort of low bounce rate, you're probably pretty good to go. Like that traffic source is great, bounce rate is low. If something is getting, like a page is getting sort of low traffic and a low bounce rate, then basically it's an opportunity for you to sort of get more traffic from it. And now the biggest scenario is high traffic, high bounce rate. You got a lot of conversion optimization that you can be doing on those pages. So I would just look at it and find sort of, some of those sort of binary ways to think about it, and then make some decisions and start optimizing.
Yeah, some really key wins right there to get some great ideas of where to test. Because most people start, especially in e-commerce, they'll start testing on the homepage or some product page. You really want to go into your analytics and to organize your top landing pages by traffic, by bounce rate, by revenue, and those are the 3 metrics really to figure out. Time on site you can add as well, but that's really where you find those quick wins. And then you can use something like CrazyEgg to put it on those actual pages, and then you figure out exactly where people are actually clicking. If they're, don't spend time on the add to cart button. If everyone's clicking there, spend it on that second click. Where is everyone secondary clicking? If they're clicking on your about section, maybe it's time to redo your about section or make it easier to find the phone number. But using all these tools really figure out exactly where to test. Now we know that the type of people are visiting there, why they're coming, what problems that they have, and also some analytics around that. Now we want to create a hypothesis to actually figure out our tests. When you guys are figuring out your priority in testing, can you just briefly talk about how your process to create a hypothesis?
Testing with first with an educated guess. So all we're doing is the first step is just finding the opportunity. So the opportunity is usually with low conversions, high bounce rate, one or the other. And then from there we identify the place to fix. And if we have funnels set up like in Google Analytics or even one of my companies, Kissmetrics, or some other tool, we'll go find out where the biggest drop-off is in the funnel. And then we spend all our time just learning about that piece of the puzzle and figuring out why people are not doing the things they do. So I think it's really easy to think about business and say, oh, people are doing these things. Let's go find out why they're doing them. What I'm more interested in when it comes to optimization and making an improvement is really finding out why people aren't doing things. Because those are the people I want to influence into doing things. And so I spend a lot of time trying to figure out why they're not doing it, where they're getting stuck. You can do on-page surveying and find out, when they bounce or when they're about to bounce, why they're bouncing. You can email them and ask them a single question like, why didn't you complete your purchase today? Or why didn't you sign up for the product, whatever it may be. And then using that information, you basically form a hypothesis. The hypothesis should be in a framework where you're essentially describing sort of like a if-then statement. So like, if I change the copy on add to cart to buy now, then I expect more people to click the button and buy versus just adding to the cart.
Right.
And so that's like a hypothesis. And then what I would go do, next step, is literally run the experiment. Change the button for half the people, and then run a test. And then there's all kinds of methodologies around running tests. The basic one I would use is to make sure that you run a test for a week. And the reason is there's a lot of variability between weekdays and weekends around conversion rates. You can also, if you already have conversion rates set up in an analytics tool, you can start looking at that and make sure that you understand the variability in the conversion rates. I've seen as high as an 80% drop in conversion rate on weekdays.
Yeah.
In businesses where it's a weekend purchase. And I've seen the opposite on businesses where weekdays, like a B2B business, where weekdays are mostly when people are signing up.
I think you mentioned a really great point that I just want to reiterate there, because I know I've seen the same thing. And whenever we start our clients' tests, we always start and stop them on the same day. Usually in my case, a lot of times I start my tests on Thursdays, and they usually run for at least 2 weeks. So if I'm going to let it run for 2 weeks, or it happens to run for 3, I'm always going to end it again on a Thursday. That way your time frames are always consistent, and especially taking into seasonality and weekends, you have to take all of that into play. Now, as far as, when you're letting your tests run, maybe you're testing a new design for your homepage of Kissmetrics. Do you start out with just a control versus control to figure out how to get to significance? And if you're testing a control versus control, have you seen it start to vary for a long time and take a really long time to eventually even out?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is basically an AA test, and the idea there is that you actually test the same thing, and the control would be you just run two versions of the same exact thing, and you actually set it up in your A/B testing tool. And usually it's to identify the patterns in your traffic and how long it'll take to reach statistical significance on something. It'll also help you understand whether your A/B testing tool is set up correctly, because if there's some variance and you're showing two sets of visitors the same thing and the conversion rate's completely different, then obviously there's something wrong with your setup.
Yeah.
But usually that's not what you identify. What you really identify is sort of, I like to call it like that excitement. You start a test and you want to like look at it every hour or every day, depending on how much traffic you have. And you're like, you get excited because something new is winning. But then what ends up happening is over time, things either flatten out or the other thing, the control starts winning, and then you're kind of bummed out because you made all this effort into, running a test, but you learned something hopefully. And so the AA test helps you understand how long you should wait before you actually start thinking about making a decision about sort of what should win and also what to test next.
Sweet. Now I want to ask you just some advice. Now, when you're testing a lot of this stuff and you're trying to iterate quickly, do you have any just some best tips that you can share to iterate smarter, get bigger wins, and just try more things in shorter periods of time?
Yeah. I think that my number one rule, I know you mentioned 2 weeks, but my number one rule is to make sure there's always a test running at those key parts of the funnel that matter. Usually I have at least this homepage test running all the time. I have a test if it's an e-commerce site in the checkout flow running all the time, because those are two sort of quite separate areas that I can independently test a lot of the time. So I try to have multiple tests running at a given time. So that's one rule I like to have. But if you can't have multiple tests for whatever reason, traffic or other things, always have one test running. And what that means is you're sort of setting it up so that no matter what you learn, you have some tests you can learn, some tests you can run next. Because sometimes what happens is you basically start a test and then you don't know what to do next. And so I have a lot of hacks for that. So one hack is, in my businesses, we tend to do more advanced tests where we're changing the step of the funnel and like moving something that's like deeper in the funnel all the way to the front and all that kind of stuff. Those tests usually take time and require engineering resources. And so what I tend to do is always have Optimizely running on these sites, so that while engineering or product or design is coming up with a test, we're always running a small test. Just like change the copy, tweak something. Even if it's not very educated, at least we have a test running, and we're getting to the habit of analyzing results, running tests. One of my friends calls it "don't drop the baton." When you're in a rally race like that, you don't drop the baton. So to me, I think it's really important to always have a test running in the key areas of your business. I don't care how small they are. You can change a color or something, even though those tests usually don't matter. It's really just about, if you have no ideas, do something. Like I said, we tend to use our own frameworks internally at my businesses, but we also have Optimizely running regularly, just so that we always have a test running no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's a really good strategy. While the other tests are running, at least be preparing for the next test to come right back up for it. Maybe it's not on the same page, maybe it's on a different page. But if you are a small business, it can be hard to run multiple tests at one time. But if you want to take just like Hiten said, Amazon does the exact same thing. They're always running small little tests here and there, but you never see their site change. It's because it's the gradual evolution of their site really changing. And, while you don't want to copy Amazon, you at least want to get into that mindset, because they've probably been doing this now for just as long as Hiten has.
Longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
But before we close out, let's tell people how Kissmetrics complements Google Analytics, because a lot of people they probably sign up for Kissmetrics, but they don't take it far enough. What would be some of the advantages of complementing Google Analytics with adding on Kissmetrics?
Sure, great question. One of my favorite topics. Basically the way I would describe it is that when you're, and this is especially in the case of optimization, which is getting a lot of attention right now and probably will for the foreseeable future. When you're doing optimization in let's say Optimizely or some A/B testing tool, you end up only being able to see conversions during the time that you're running the test. What analytics helps you do, whether it's Google Analytics or even Kissmetrics or something else, it helps you actually see the lifetime sort of conversion rate over time. So for example, you're not necessarily going to see repeat purchases in an A/B testing tool, but you'll be able to see your A/B test against repeat purchases in an analytics tool. And so you could do that in Google Analytics. You could do that in Kissmetrics. The difference between Google Analytics and Kissmetrics there is that Kissmetrics actually ties what somebody saw to who they are. So whether it's a really like a cookie when they're anonymous, or even an email address once they've converted, we're actually always tying the data to individual people. So you can even see who fell in which bucket, but you can also get accuracy about things that certain people bought. And go way deeper into analyzing your A/B tests, and it's really deeper funnel metrics down the line. Also, I will do a quick shout out here for Kissmetrics. We recently added an A/B testing report in the analytics tool to allow you to easily see later on conversions. So again, e-commerce business, it would be, if you're trying to get more people to add something to the cart, you can also see if they bought more, or even if they came back and bought again, or even if they opened your thank you email and things like that, and then see what the significance was and the results were for that, even after you stop running the test. So you can do a lot of deeper later on analysis. If you're like a SaaS business, software as a service product, you can actually understand the impact of an A/B test all the way down to cancellations that might happen a month or two or even longer later.
So with e-commerce, you can figure out the lifetime value of an individual and then see what the patterns of purchases that ideal person will make. So maybe you want to take other customers in your e-commerce store down those same paths. So maybe they buy a lower cost item and then upgrade to a better item and then have a repurchase of another item. Kissmetrics really allows you to nail it down to actually who does that and how long it takes people to actually purchase.
Absolutely. Yep.
Sweet. Well, how do you want people to either contact you or learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find. My email is hnshah, HNSHAH @gmail.com, and that's also my Twitter handle, HNSHAH on Twitter.
What would be one thing that listeners can do to really take their conversion rates to the next level?
Yeah, I think I already said this, and I can't stress it enough because I see that even like some of the best people that are really good at A/B testing sort of miss this point. But it's like, never stop testing, always have a test running. And even right now, you could easily sign up for Optimizely and get a test running by the end of today, whatever day it is, by the end of today, if you're not running a test. So I would encourage all of you, sign up for Optimizely. They have a free trial. Start getting a test running. That's the bottom line, and never stop testing. So always have a test running at all times. That's probably the biggest piece of advice I can have, because if you're not testing, you're not improving.
Sweet. Definitely agree. Thanks a lot for your time, Hiten.
Take care.
Thank you for watching the Marketing Optimization Podcast with AlexDesigns. Please remember to subscribe to all of the videos in my YouTube channel. Thank you.